takes a8 looks forced to my eyes. Rook takes a8, and notice that the rook and queen are both on the open files. And Maurice, you've got some highlights to share.
Well, in this position, the computer agreed with Kamsky's decision to give back the pawn right away to play f5 and to play rook a8. And now the critical move is do not trade. One of the things that players often do is trade thinking that it's just a thing you should do. But in this position, it's saying drop the rook back, a4 or a2, so that black doesn't dominate those files. And it says white, and he has played rook a2. Black will not be able to dominate those files now. And it says black has absolutely no advantage, maybe a small smidgen of a 0.03 hundredths, that is, of a pawn, and it just thinks the game is fine for white. Guys?
I still don't understand the concept of what the computer's recommendation, which was made by Ramirez. It still looks to me that after the move rook a8, this is the big difference. Ramirez has spotted he can play the move rook b1, counterattacking the queen. He didn't have to move his queen. After the trade of queens, rook takes, both players have active rooks, but check this out. This pawn on d6 is much better protected than this pawn on d3. Still, after king f8, or actually Gata did play bishop f6, Gata has ideas of e4 and bishop d4, bringing the bishop to a dominating central square. I don't know, I still like Gata's position, even though he's not material ahead. Maurice, what do you think?
Well, we know the move of the championships, Yaz. What is it?
Not G4. Please don't
G4 right
G4.
now.
No.
G4, pressuring the pawn on f5, but more importantly, threatening the move G5. And so if G4, if you play E4 in response, still G5, and white is totally in the game after this move. Incredible. We've seen this move. We keep highlighting it, and it shows up in this position. Will he find this really spectacular resource, G4, staying fully in the game and getting closer to that possibility of a draw and the Armageddon game?
That's right. G4 in the end game. We talked about how in last game, Gata Kamsky's G4 gave him more winning chances. And now it looks like it's an equalizing idea for Ramirez.
But I got to tell you, it goes to show how rook and bishop can outplay rook and knight, that white's under pressure to find this only move G4. Anything else.
And E4 is a super strong move, unleashing that bishop, which can also come to D4 and hit on F2.
Exactly. So Ramirez probably didn't realize that the position was drifting into the kind of game where he has to play not just only moves, but actually desperate moves. The move G4, you know, it's very easy to miss, and the pressure is on him now to come up with this really spectacular move G4. Not a common thing in this type of position for white to have to face. As tables turn, advantage, in my opinion, still lies with Kamsky. Regardless of what the computer thinks, G4 is not an easy move to play. But then again, what else?
That's right. G4, he's certainly going to consider whether he's actually going to play it. I think G5 is the tricky thing to see. G4 will come to his mind, freeing himself up and trying to break up those two beautiful pressuring pawns. But seeing G5. That being said, look at how much Ramirez is thinking. Remember in the last game when you thought he really needed to find that critical move, king to f6.
Which he found, and he did it.
For the first time in the game, he took a few minutes, and he found it. And it looks like he might be doing the very same thing in this game.
Well,
and then G6, of course, also.
Check this out, Jen. With G4, we're anticipating G4. And then how's this for a line of play? E4 attacking the knight. G5 attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to C3. Now, what black is secretly hoping is that there will be a trade of pawns on E4, so the bishop could drop back to D4, attacking the pawn on F2. But this spectacular move, G6, threatening a back rank mate, and in case of H takes, knight G5, white's doing well. He did not play G4.
Instead, he played rook to B8 check, and after king to F7, he played rook to B7 check, and now of course, Gata could just go back to G8, but instead, what about coming up to G6?
Well, King G6, then I'm guessing that G4 is the move, but what other moves are there for white? Because this threat, this positional threat of E4, unleashing the bishop, allowing black to pose the bishop on D2, that would be lights out. Maurice, what do you think?
Well, inserting the check is not favorable at all in the computer's eyes. King G6 should be played now, and by the king being up in the position, it's preventing the move G5 from occurring. It just seems as though all Ramirez did was improve the position of the black king. You didn't need this king to be in the game as well. The guy already has great pieces. Now the black king is dynamic, aggressive. We know in the end game, kings belong up the board, but instead, Gata has backed his king up to E8. Very surprising move. King G6 was perfectly fine, but the game goes on.
That's right, the game goes on, and if the game is a draw, we've got that Armageddon bidding match. We had a couple questions about that. Will there be an increment? Yes. We don't want to see Blitz determining the
U.S. Championship
yes.
title.
Now, a 5-second increment is rather fast, that being said, but it's not the same as having your flag actually fall in a winning or close to winning position. And
I do think the players are trading inaccuracies at this
all right.
moment.
King E8 played, and now it looks like Ramirez has retreated with his rook, probably.
Okay, so here his idea.
E4, rook E1, yeah.
Precisely, E4, rook E1, and thanks to that series of checks, the black king has been placed on the E file, so white no longer has to worry about having to move his knight, and it looks like black simply loses a pawn. That's why that move King G6 was so critical, and I really...
And very natural. I wonder what Gata saw.
Yeah, Gata saw something that he didn't like, but King G6 sure looked like the right move. And Gata has played King D7 after Rook B1, again, setting up that threat of E4. I think we can see G5. Well, what has he played? He played
Rook to D1.
To D1. Okay, so the idea here is that he can meet the move E4 with trades, knight to D2, and bishop D4 can simply be met by the calm knight takes. But is that so clear? Rook comes to E2, and doesn't black have something going on?
That's true. So even though we won a pawn, you're going to win it back because we can't play F3. It's pinned.
Right. So rook to D1, in the words of the people of the Northwest, seizing the defensive. I really don't like this from Ramirez. I do believe Gata is pressing, once again, a technical game. Maurice, share your thoughts, please.
I agree with you, Yaz. To see the move rook to B1 to D1 certainly doesn't inspire confidence when you know you should be playing actively in the endgame. Maybe it's not enough but for black to win, but you've got to feel like Gata is thinking, yum, thank you for just freezing your own pieces when I wasn't even forcing you to. So I think right here, Ramirez has really made the task that much harder for himself, and Gata has played H5, ruling out G4 for a long time to come.
Wow, what an instructive move, considering how often we've been finding G4 to be the saving grace here for white. H5, just as you mentioned when Ramirez was black, a move that he would have tried to get in.
Exactly.
To stop the freeing G4.
Exactly. The idea is simply to gain space, of course, and furthermore, with the pawn now on H5, it makes his own ideas of G5, G4 playable. So advantages for black if he can do that. On the other hand, just because if I dare go back one move, captures, E4 captures, I actually did prefer this line of play for Gata, as we'll see in a moment. After knight takes rook here.
Now, is knight takes totally forced? Could we hold off on that move for one?
Okay.
Or you're going to play E3 to a strong effect. Yeah.
Exactly. But the idea from black's point of view is that...
Now we are getting some moves.
Yes. He did play H5. Let's just jump into the game because this is getting exciting. After H5, what happened next? G4 anyway. G4 anyway. Our favorite move.
Wow.
And that precipitated H takes G, and Ramirez is dreaming that he will be able to play knight H2 and recapture here on G4, keeping his pawn under protection. Maurice.
Actually, yes, it's knight to D2 that the computer favors. One of those positional games, positional blockades that you're famous for, that I would hate to have to try to break down. So knight to D2 is the money idea against this capture on G4, and then suddenly he would have a great position for his knight on E4. Gata has avoided that with the move E4.
Okay, E4, very forcing line of play. We would expect takes on E4, takes on E4. Should I get in this move G5 now, or after knight D2, bishop D4, knight takes rook
E2 again.
Rook E2 again. Planning on winning back this pawn on F2. I still like Black's chances in this position. I don't know what the times are, Jennifer.
We got him right here up on the screen. A big time advantage for Ramirez. Wow, that's surprising considering he's under so much pressure.
Yeah, and but okay, the position's favorable for Gata. I believe it's still at this moment. I deliberately turned off my engine so I can put myself in the player's shoes and understand. The computer oftentimes interferes with, I may miss a tactic. Help me, dear audience, if I do miss a tactic. But E4, and Ramirez has to come up with the right move here. And he has played something, it looks like G5. No.
He actually took on E4 first, yes.
He took on E4.
And Kamsky took on G4.
Gata recaptured with capturing on G4. Well, that's a big surprise. And this big time move, E5, I like that move by Ramirez. And that was actually critical, I think, because after knight H2, what would have happened after knight H2? Perhaps a simple move like G3 takes rook C2, going at, or even rook E2, going after these pawns on E4 or C4. Black would win his pawn back with the superior game. So Ramirez properly played the move E4, E5, and I'm sure Gata was disgusted that Ramirez found this key move at this crucial moment of game 2 in the playoffs.
Very instructive move. And we saw something similar earlier, just trying to blunt the power of the bishop and using that in-between move, that Zwischenzug, right?
Right.
So, in fact, Kamsky took that knight on F3.
Very
and of
reluctant.
course, Kamsky immediately recapturing on F6.
Very reluctantly had to allow the trade of his beautiful bishop for that knight. Takes on F3, takes on F6, rook D3. I am absolutely sure Ramirez is now eyeballing this pawn. What has he done instead? Oh my goodness,
He played rook to C1. Huh.
Okay. I assume he didn't want to see rook to F3, rook to D3, rook takes variations. I'm not quite sure.
More to calculate, perhaps, after rook takes C4.
Rook to C4. Maybe he felt that the C pawn was more dangerous than his F pawn. A very reasonable judgment, to be sure. He did, in fact, play rook to C1, protecting against that idea, and maybe he's just setting up for rook C3, king coming over here and trying to round up this pawn.
That's right. And what do you think of this passive defense, Ashley?
Well, the computer loves his moves. Ramirez is playing like a genius. I mean, his defensive posture may be dubious in our eyes, but just the way he's playing with such amazing precision defensively, he's like a rock-solid bull saying, come get me and see what's going to happen. It's incredible. I'm really appreciating this guy's technique, and he's so calm and he's doing it so quickly. Are these clock times correct? Can't be, right? 18 minutes to 7 minutes?
And then he gave Kamsky a look with that move, rook to c3. I wonder if they're what that means.
Well, just at the board, you know,
Yeah.
at times it's inadvertent. You're not trying to stare
Oh,
down
no,
your
no,
opponent.
no. Not to be rude.
But, you know, you do, you can't help it. You got to flash a look at your opponent.
Oh, yes, this is
Is
an
he at
emotional game.
ease? Yeah, to see if your opponent's at ease or looking a little bit nervous. But this move, rook c3 now, after the inclusion of the move f7, f5, makes a great deal of sense for white because he's hoping to capture on f3, restoring the material balance, and then capturing on f6.
Now, if rook a4 in this position, hoping that after a rook takes f3, we can take on c4 and transpose the similar variations, Alejandro can play this king h2 and round out the pawns with a king instead. And, of course, the king being a really key piece to get in at this point.
Exactly.
And so instead, I think Gata played something else. Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
Actually, it seems Gata has not moved as yet. His time's still ticking down. We should note, Gata won 4 games in a row, and he drew 5 in a row in the main event, and then he just drew another game, and this one is looking like yet another draw. Quite possibly, it is very close. The computer's giving virtually no edge to Gata here, 0.23. Gata's got to be getting a little frustrated. What do I have to do to win a game again? Has he ever gone a week in the U.S. Championships without winning a game? Pretty interesting, maybe frustrating situation for him right now. And his youthful opponent seems very confident, flicking out the moves, not at all intimidated by this 3-time champion.
That's right, and it does look like we're nearing our Armageddon playoff. And as we know, that will include a secret bidding process. So you can go to uschesschamps.com regulations if you're at all confused, because it can be tricky to understand at first. Basically, they're going to bid to see who gets black pieces and draw odds. The other player will get more time and white.
Right.
Whoever bids lower will get black and draw odds.
Right.
So we saw in the 2010 U.S. Championship playoff between Schulman and Kamsky, Kamsky bid an extremely low amount, 25 minutes, and this was actually a game 60. So he bid 25 minutes, Yuri bid something like 40 minutes, right? And so, of course, Gata got black draws in 25 minutes, Yuri got the full 60 and the white pieces. In this case, it would be 45 minutes for the player who gets white.
I see.
And I think their bids will actually be kind of close to 25 to 30 minutes. And we'll have to see who thinks that being black is more important just to retain those draw odds. Of course, Gata Kamsky, with 6 draws in a row, as Maurice pointed out, might think that he should bid really low because he seems to be drawing a lot of games.
Well, it's amazing what a week makes. When we started the championship, it was the Kamsky Express, just riding over people. 4-0, lots of chitter chatter on our set about the Bobby Fischer prize, $64,000 for a perfect score. I was discussing this with a lot of my colleagues, and I was saying, no, it's so hard, so difficult to put together that many wins. I didn't see it as being possible, and sure enough, now we're looking at a Gata Kamsky who has to win just to win the U.S. Championship, never mind a perfect score. King e7 was played by Gata, and immediately rook e6, e3 check, king f6, rook e6 check. I don't know if this is the
G5 was played.
The right drawing procedure from White's point of view. White's king is very passive in this line of play. Maybe Ramirez just thinks that this line is a draw. For example,
rook c2 was played.
Rook c6, rook takes, d6. Maybe after rook d4, rook takes, black has emerged with an extra pawn, but those doubled f pawns are not as meaningful as, for example, if that f5 pawn were on the e4 square.
And we can bring our rook around to check. You're not going to be able to actually invade with your own king.
Right.
Because that f2 pawn guards against it coming to the key g3 square.
I'm a little bit ahead of the players at the moment. Rook c2 is on the board. Rook takes d6. Maybe we could see another funny line, almost the difference here. Remember that previous game, the first game where the rook was in front of the pawn? But in this case, black's king has the nearly ideal f4 square in which to hide behind. So for example, just to continue this line for a moment, rook takes d6, king f4, d7, rook d4. There's no ideas of moving the rook with a check because that pawn on f5 properly shelters the black king.
Right, shouldering that king similar to the other game where the king was on f6 with the pawn on f7.
That's right. So rook c2, the reason why I didn't, well, okay, I shouldn't go too far backwards, but I didn't see anything specifically wrong earlier with rook takes f3, king f6, rook e3, and then going after this d6 pawn, just getting rid of one tooth on the f3 pawn. That didn't happen.
We do have another move in. It looks like Alejandro just played rook to c6.
Okay, we would certainly expect rook takes c4 in this case, d6 again, and Ramirez probably thinking that this position is a draw. Still Gata on the sunny side of the torture, as we would say.
Well, earlier, yes, Alejandro had to find some good moves, but Maurice, your thoughts on this finale here?
Dead draw, no chance for anything. How do you make any progress with black? Your king can't get into the position. You really can't get to the f-pawn. It's got to be a draw, no? It just looks like Ramirez knows it. Kamsky's sitting there for a long time. If he thought that this position held some promise, he would have moved already. I think he thinks, not again. The guy holding a rook pawn with accuracy as he just blocked the last game, and now his head is in his hands. I think he realizes it. Ramirez has figured out yet another way to draw. By the way, they have now played, this is their fourth game. They played two classical games. One in the last championship, Ramirez had black and was crushed by Kamsky on the black side of a Sicilian Khan. Then this year, with the fantastic bishop h3 move that Ramirez shocked him with, and now, sort of like in both games, Ramirez is saying, you're not beating me. For some reason, you just can't beat me now. And he's like he's run up against a brick wall in Ramirez, very confident. And I think we're going to see the Armageddon game because there's just not much to play for in this position.
Wow, I'm just so impressed by Ramirez. He's playing like a mature veteran instead of on his maiden voyage in the playoffs of the U.S. Championships. Never played a playoff like this before. He's acquitting himself marvelously.
Oh, that's right. And what are your predictions for this bidding process? How low do you think they will go?
Boy, I really have to put my thinking cap on. We do have a move by Gata Kamsky. He did play, whoa, do I got this right? He didn't capture the pawn, which we thought was an automatic. He jumped in with king f4. Gata, is calculating a very forcing line now. He's thinking that I will go after this f2 pawn. I'm going to give you two connected passed pawns, but I'll have wonderful play with the pawn on f3. So let's just take a look at the possible lines that Gata Kamsky has calculated. It's probably, no, he's not taking any risk with this decision at all. Maurice, am I right? Wow.
Well, it looked that's a different move, and he did not have to play that. But the move rook takes c5 looked easy, actually. Rook takes c5, rook c1 check, king h2, rook over, pawn up, and then after rook takes pawn, just bring your king back.
Right.
And there's no progress. The pawn is not helping. This d pawn is very strong, and black just doesn't have the time to get his f-pawn in the position he wants. If, for example, rook to c2 here, since rook to d2 would be answered by rook d5, then just rook down to c8, and no progress possible for black. He just cannot shelter his position. So
wow.
Nothing was in that position, but it looks like Ramirez played rook h6, and Kamsky came back to g5, and that looks within tolerance as well.
That's right. So rook h6, just again with the idea of a skewer. So instead of even bothering to calculate those lines, Ramirez just trying to hold a balance with rook h6, and Gata compelled to play king back to g5.
Right.
King can't make any progress because of the f2 pawn, and then Ramirez is just going to shoot his rook back to c6, it appears.
Right, and that would force a repetition. And while that's all taking place, I'm still processing what I might bid.
That's right.
In the Armageddon. It's I haven't given an answer. I never got into. I got into lots of playoffs over the course of my career, and I feel myself very experienced. But it was an innovation here at the St. Louis Chess Club that they introduced this auction. And I love it. That is really, really an intriguing idea. And
silent, secret auction, by the way.
Yes.
So secret bidding, not an open bid.
Exactly. And the audience, I'm expecting you to help me. What would you bid? Because, frankly, I don't know. I really don't know. I have ideas. Maurice, you have ideas.
Indeed, a couple of moves have been played. Rook h8. We should get back to this board before I even say anything. Let the game go on, and let's stay abreast, and I'll give my opinion afterwards.
So yes, rook h8 was played. Rook takes c4.
Rook h8, rook takes c4, d6, rook c5. I am anticipating the straightforward rook c8.
He did play it. He did
going after this pawn on c5.
We've got that position on the board, and Gata Kamsky on move. Rook takes d6. Rook takes c5.
And even though Gata is a pawn ahead, it shouldn't offer him any winning chances after precise moves like rook check, provoking the pawn to move to f4. And I think, and let me just be 100% sure about this, I can either come back, and I don't see how black could progress, or I could try to go for the active and with rook here.
Now this did happen, but after rook c4 check, instead of f4, Gata Kamsky played king to h3. So that's the position we have now on the board.
Okay, excuse
so
me.
rook c4 check, king h3, and Alejandro to play.
Well, when being faced with mate in one, there's only one move to play.
And rook c1 was played, and now Gata Kamsky quickly playing rook g6 check.
With ideas of
rook g2, yeah, king h2, exactly, trying to get onto g1 if you played f1.
If you go king h1, keeping the king out, it's important that you don't play the move rook f1 here, because after rook f1, f4, it's Zugzwang on the board. So you'd have to play rook c2, and unless I'm missing some clear winning idea here for black, I see a draw. Maurice?
The move king h1 is forced, by the way. He must play this move. King f1 instantly loses to king h2, and the game is over. So he shouldn't be thinking now. His fans will not be happy if he moves a king exit stage left. That's going to be awful, because now he would actually have to deal with his mate threat. He'd have to play king e1 and then the trade of rooks, and of course it's over in that position. So he must now play king h1, and he has done so. And rook down, though, rook to c2, and no problems at all, because there's no way to really make progress in this position. If he just moves his rook up, and he has done so, this is still well within tolerance, a dead draw. And by the way, the king, White's king, is currently in stalemate. We should note that. So if White could somehow sack his rook, if the king drops back, for example, that line you're showing there, Yaz, some kind of rook sack, and it's a stalemate. So Kamsky has to be real careful about his next move. In fact, I think his rook's going to have to just leave. I don't think he can leave his rook on that square. He can't make any progress. It's just stuck. And Ramirez is eyeing him, and you can see he knows this is a draw. No way you make, even within all those moves he played, when you say all rook endings are drawn, this is what they mean, this kind of thing. And there it is. His rook has left the area, not wanting to stalemate.
You know, Jen, I think we've been here 10 days, almost 2 weeks. We've shown, well, let's say hundreds of different styles of checkmate. We finally found our first stalemate.
That's right. We haven't found too many beautiful stalemates. You got it.
And there was one, rook c2. We tried king g4, and we demonstrated the one stalemate. In order to avoid that stalemate, what Maurice was mentioning, White's king is absolutely stuck in the corner. Gata did drop back with his rook. Why he chose the g7 square, no idea. He could have chose the g8, g6. square.
Absolutely no difference between G7 and G8.
I know, just a matter of taste, I would suppose. I would expect rook c3 saying, hey, let me take away your sole advantage, that extra double pawn. And if the king dropped back, hey, let me just chase you a little bit backwards. And
Or back to C3 also.
pardon me?
Or you could just play back to C3.
Or back to c3 with the rook, as you mentioned. That looks absolutely stone cold draw. Now we can start to discuss the bidding procedure.
All right, and they probably are contemplating the bidding procedure right now. And I think Grandmaster Maurice Ashley's got a bid in mind.
I don't think they're contemplating anything right now, but
Except
making
the game.
sure this game gets over properly. But, you know, last time when we did the commentary together, Jen, we saw Kamsky bid 25 minutes, as you mentioned, with 60 minutes in the clock. I was stunned. I said, 25 minutes, is he crazy? But it ended up working out for him. So I anticipate with now at 45 minutes, Kamsky to go as low as 20, maybe even 18 minutes in his bid. I think he wants those black pieces, and he thinks, showing how he's drawing easily with black, he's always the one with the initiative with black, that he doesn't believe he could lose with the black pieces. And he said it himself. So far, I'm playing great with black and horrible with white, so he wants to win the bid and not have to play badly with white again and end up drawing the game and losing the championship.
I'd agree with that, but I think something like 18 might be a little low. He might feel like it's obviously a gamble. He might feel that if he does 22, he'll win the bid anyway and get those extra precious 4 minutes. But we will find out soon, it seems. We've got some of these moves on the board. Rook to C4 check, F4.
Has been played. I would anticipate, well, just hanging around and asking, what are you going to do? He instead, Ramirez that is, instead brought his rook to the 8th rank, anticipating that he'd be able to force a number of checks against black's king, and his own king will be released.
King F5 was played.
King F5 was placed.
And now these double pawns.
Still, Ramirez has to find some key moves here. I mean, it's still very easy for him to go wrong. I'm not sure I like this move, Rook C8. In fact, if we go back just one
Give us an example
move,
of him going wrong.
Well, I'm thinking that white should have just tethered
Right.
black's king to this pawn. So, for example, just saying, go ahead, keep doing whatever it is that you want to do, and only after the rook has made a commitment to the F1 square do you drop back with the rook. I'm thinking that this would have been the easiest way. The reason why is because in the game position after this move, look how easy it is for white, to go wrong. Imagine a rook check, king comes here, another rook check, and you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to lollygag around. Well, the rook would come to F2, and rook would come to G2, I beg your pardon, and actually win this pawn on F2, and that would just simply be a dreadful consequence.
Actually, yes, I'm sorry. You'd be re-stalemating again. And maybe then you could keep checking in that position.
I keep forgetting about
not rook E3 check, of course, which would be a disaster, but rook D6 check. And again, where does the king hide? Rook D2 check, and it's a stalemate. Well, not quite. You're right. This capture. Oh, there you go. Rook F1 again. And if the king moves, then rook takes F3, and there we go. No, but he could play a rook. He could maybe play a rook check in that position. No, rook H2 check is winning in that position.
Wow.
Actually, rook H2. And
So
king takes rook. So yeah, it could easily go wrong.
Easily, it's
and now
very
king over.
easy.
So that's nasty.
So the king coming over the other way, making the threats against the F pawn much more dangerous than they were when, and he has played your move rook to C3, but now the king coming to E4,
and
rook C4 check.
Whoa, rook C4 check. Are you sure? Because I'm seeing king E2. King D3 to King
D3 was played.
And Ramirez may have blown it. Oh my goodness.
Because if rook takes F4, King E2 is a bit of a problem, huh?
Not a bit of a problem. A major development
And this
here.
has all happened on the board.
Oh
all of
my
this
gosh.
has happened, and now he played rook to A4.
King takes
King takes
F2.
F2 occurred. Rook to A2 check.
Now this
King G3.
This is a draw
King
by
G1.
some miracle.
Well,
this is
there
still
it
a book
is.
draw because he has Rook G2 check.
Correct.
The key move, Rook G2, bam,
And
he's
it
done
happened.
it. Well
Rook
known
G2
and Gata,
check.
look at that.
Rook G2 check, and if we finally got our stalemate on the board.
Now our second stalemate.
Yes, well, our stalemate actually occurred, not just a variation.
Wow.
This is a well-known stalemate from Levinfish Smyslov,
And
he's laughing that he's fallen for it.
Gata is laughing because I'm sure when he played the move Rook B7, he thought, got him.
And we have a draw, and the Armageddon match is imminent.
Whoa.
And Elliot Lua, Alejandro's friend,
Yeah.
and fan now, can't help but smile there.
Wow.
But everybody was smiling. That
This is
very exciting finale.
A shout out to our audience. Let's take a poll, guys and gals. What would you bid if you were Gata Kamsky, knowing that you've just drawn 6 games in a row? I think
7 games
games in a row. You're unstoppable, but you haven't been able to win. You want the black pieces. How low would you bid? I'm still clueless. I still don't want to commit myself until I see the results of our poll.
We do have some audio from the playing hall with executive director and arbiter Tony Rich. He's the assistant arbiter to Frank Guadalupe, explaining the bidding process.
So you can pick any amount of time, 0 minutes to 45 minutes.
You got it. Well, and now they're thinking about their bids. You'd wonder if also maybe the outcome of the games today, the openings and the results, might even affect it further. Perhaps last night they were thinking, I'll bid X, but now they see 2 draws and the game's involving a lot of early trades and great defenses by black. Maybe they want to bid even lower.
Right. And it makes sense that there would have to be written bids as well, right?
Yes, written bids, and then the arbiters will open both of them, and the bid that is lower will get the black pieces and draw odds. So, for instance, if Ramirez bids 20 minutes and Gata Kamsky bids what Maurice suggested, 18 minutes, Gata Kamsky will get 18 minutes, black and draw odds. Ramirez's time will revert to 45 minutes. So.
Got it. So the player who has the white pieces will always have 45 minutes plus the 5 seconds.
Exactly.
And the player who has the black pieces gets the time that he bid upon, but also the 5 seconds.
Right, so that's pretty big too. So that's why they can go as low as 18 minutes, 20 minutes, because you are going to get that 5-second increment, which is pretty key. And as you see today, both players playing well and quickly and not letting the nerves get to them and get really low on time may encourage them to bid even lower than they had planned to perhaps last night.
Maurice, your thoughts?
I don't know if you would say what Gata Kamsky is doing is playing well. He is missing one movers. That idea with Rook G2 leading to a stalemate, that's basic stuff. He knows that from his days as a teenager back in Russia. That was just way too easy for him to miss, and then suddenly he's looking up laughing because he's missing move after move. That's the second big move that Ramirez has played. Remember that move, Bishop H3 from their classical game that they played. I think Gata is a little bit off right now, and with less time on the clock, especially dramatically less, he might just miss a move in the next time control. And Ramirez, how confident does he look? Effortlessly, okay, maybe not effortlessly, but so smooth, relaxed, even in worse positions, defending incredibly well, pulling rabbits out of his hat. I think that it's to his advantage right now in this situation. You got to think the underdog has a puncher's chance to win this championship.
Absolutely, although we should point out that Ramirez was on the defensive with the white pieces. So
In both games.
Gata Kamsky outplaying him in the opening stage and making Ramirez really fight tooth and nail for that draw. And then in the end, the question is, could Black have won? Because I mean, how could he have really differed with this against this idea?
I don't think he could have won.
So therefore, it's not that he necessarily missed the stalemate so much as like he tried his best and Ramirez found the right defense.
Exactly.
Well, this not really the right defense, because the right, as you would have said, would maybe not even to let the king enter in this direction.
Right.
And instead, hold on to that pawn on f3.
Right.
Unless Ramirez was so confident about this endgame, he wanted to play it for the fans, but I find that highly doubtful.
Exactly. I don't think anybody wants to play the white side because any misstep could lose the game. And he's just feeling as preppy and as happy as possible because the underdog has gotten himself into an Armageddon game. I'm still anxious to know what you would bid. Here it comes. If I were in Ramirez's shoes, I would bid 25. And if Gata bid 20, I would want to play the white pieces. I take the 45 minutes. I take the extra time. I like being forced to play for a win, especially when my opponent's down on the clock.
I believe that you are right. I think Gata is more likely to win this bid. I think we also are going to see something similar to what you say. Alejandro, of course, doesn't want to bid too high, because then if Gata Kamsky bids something like 30, he would really hurt himself immensely. We see a lot of other players from the championship and grandmasters. Grandmaster Josh Friedel in the audience, the young Sarah Chang, who had a nice finish to her tournament. And Anna Sharevich, who we interviewed a couple times in the show, women's grandmaster from Belarus, studying at Lindenwood. So the audience here at the St. Louis Chess Club is getting really excited, both the live audience and those watching at the World Chess Hall of Fame. I'm sure those of you watching at home are thrilled. I can't wait to see what these two guys bid. We are going to take a quick break, and we're going to find out both the bids and, in just a couple of hours, the U.S. chess champion. Don't go away.
Welcome to Armageddon.
Oh, my God.
That's why I'm looking. Okay, Tony? Okay, you have Alejandro's envelope? Somewhere. Okay. Alejandro Ramirez said he is willing to start with 19 minutes and 40 seconds.
Gata, 20 minutes and 0 seconds.
Alejandro will play black. Give us
It
a
is,
couple of minutes to set the clocks.
So he gets 1940 with 5-second increments. Gata gets 45.
Minutes and how many seconds?
40.
Okay.
1940. Oh, okay.
25 minutes, no seconds. 19 minutes, 40
Yep.
seconds.
Got it. Got it.
5-second increments.
Yes. Yep.
Let me set their names.
Okay, Tony needs 2 minutes to set up the names. And
I'll give that to you.
Yeah, Brian probably switched the names.
you bet. What is the garage?
Bring a chair over here, right there.
Okay. Okay.
Who's looking left here? Okay, 27. Yeah. Still
If you want to get out.
You got 2, Elliot? Oh, you do. You got 2.
I don't know. Is it 1945?
Okay.
You got one. That's almost. It's like 2 take away 1.
There you go back.
Jealousy to sit.
I did a array out. I got a chair. Hold on, let me do some work array out.
Yeah.
30 bowls of fruit and put them here.
Okay, waiting for Tony. How's Tony doing on the names? this varies over a little bit.
Sorry, just like I can feel your presence over the board, you know?
Hello and welcome back to the 2013 U.S. Chess Championship playoffs. I'm Jen Shahade. I'm with Grandmasters Yasser Seirawan and Maurice Ashley. We are in the Armageddon death match here for the 2013 title. And we have some interesting bids here. We were thinking that Gata Kamsky was going to get black pieces and draw odds because of his aggressive bid back in 2010 against Yuri Shulman, where he bid 25 minutes, almost half of what his opponent bid. This time, Ramirez outbid him by just 15 seconds, 19:45, whereas Kamsky bid 20 minutes. That gives Ramirez the black pieces and draw odds by just a hair. And we are seeing the same opening as we saw in their first game.
Absolutely, C5.
In which Gata played G3 in this position.
And didn't get too much with G3. I'm sure he's going to go for D5 because he's in a must-win situation. I know Maurice has got a lot of thoughts to share about the bidding process. Maurice.
Well, I thought personally that Ramirez has tricked Kamsky yet again. Imagine you bid 20 minutes and the guy says 19:45. That means he got inside your head, thought you might bid 20, and let me just shave a little bit so I can catch you out there. So Kamsky must be thinking yet again, what the heck? This kid just keeps escaping one way or the other when I'm trying to get something done. And so now Kamsky's forced to win with white. He has not been playing well with the white pieces, and he hasn't won a game in 7 tries. This is Gata Kamsky, 3-time champ, against a much lower-rated opponent. Not saying any advantage for either side here, but Ramirez has to be feeling yet another boost of morale.
That's interesting, although I do think this bid is a little low. It's very risky. Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez with a huge time deficit, and if Gata succeeds in getting an edge with white and complicating the position, it's going to be extremely difficult for Ramirez to find all the right defenses with so much less time on the clock. Now, he does still have those 5-second increment, so that will help if he gets to an end game.
Agreed all around. My only comment would be that I actually like the situation that Gata has found himself in. He knows he has a must-win situation, and he knows that he's got a big time edge. So he's going to be looking for a type of battle where the critical moments come later in the game.
And we do have, yes, exactly, and we have the same opening that we saw in round 1 of their playoff.
And again, Gata repeated with this move C4. I just suspected, he didn't play it, I suspected that he might go E4 and go into a kind of open Sicilian or Sicilian dragon, even if you will, with a fianchetto. He did play C4, a repeat. We saw in game 1 this move by Ramirez, Queen C7, provoked that move Knight A3, and he was repeated the same idea, and again, the players are repeating game 1, move for move. D7, D6 has been played.
Clever psychology here by Ramirez. He already labored over these moves so he can play them pretty quickly and gain a little bit of time on his clock with a 5-second increment. That being said, we kind of liked White's position in that game, didn't we?
Yes, a smidgen, but again, a very normal, shall we say, slight disadvantage for Black that Ramirez kept the position throughout. Very cagey play by Ramirez. And now Gata has to think, well, if I repeat game 1 with my B2, B3, how will I gain an edge over what happened in game 1? I didn't really see it where there was any major misstep where he had any major opportunity, I mean to say, for Gata. So when you're the defender, you play your number 1 defense until it's broken, and it wasn't broken in game 1.
Well, let's see where these guys differ. Right now, it's It's Gata's turn. He's the first one who seems to be thinking, although we'll probably see a lot of that in this match because Gata, of course, started the game with twice as much time as his opponent. Over twice as much time.
True that. Maurice, thoughts?
This business about having a time advantage, I think, is so deceptive because when you stop and think, you could easily fritter away this advantage. The minutes just tick away as you're busy thinking, what are the winning lines? And we saw this before when Shulman wasn't able to crash through against Kamsky in their matchup 2 years ago, that he kept playing more and more aggressively. Now, Garry Kasparov showed the way when he played against Anatoly Karpov in a critical matchup, and you have to win. It's best to prolong the battle, going and let the time tick away. Don't look for advantage. You don't need it. Just keep him an even bigger advantage on the clock. Let his clock tick down to like 5 minutes, and you keep your 25 simple moves. So I think for any forcing lines, just keep making moves. Don't let the clock times equalize at all. Don't let it ever come close. And you'll find that the clock alone will be your friend, and your opponent will start to blunder. Jen and Yaz?
We have some questions coming in at Hasmi or Kamsky and Ramirez playing for. They're playing gets 20K, or if Ramirez draws the game, of course, he'll also $1 prize and the U.S. Championship title.
And it's the prestige of the title, trust me, that is even worth more than the $10,000. Nice payday for both, but Gata Kamsky, he has to find a way of putting the pressure on Ramirez and forcing the young man to think and use up his clock. Obviously, Gata's biggest ally at this particular moment is the clock. So he's got to figure out a way of putting problems that Ramirez will have. That God is desperate or anything of that nature. After knight takes b5, queen takes c4, I'm sure the computer thinks this is just absolutely marvelous for the second player. However, we see a lot of these sacrifice in Catalan openings, and I was just looking at a position after queen c4, the queen takes c4, pardon me, the queen drops back to c5. White gets a powerful initiative for the pawn. Perhaps it peters out. With this move, bishop e3, I'm angling for rook c1, attacking the queen, and knight c7, winning the trapped rook in the corner. It probably is a bad idea, but it's at least something that would force.
Let's show that one more time.
Let's go back, and I'm just saying this is the position at the board, and if got in difficulties, thinking difficulties, I mean to say, this sacrifice, well, is it worth a punt? I'm not 100% sure, but it would really mix things up tremendously, wouldn't it?
Oh, that's right, and put Ramirez under a lot of pressure. I do want to give out our chess.com membership of the day, and that goes to Jinji Fan, who asked us during our earlier playoffs, the rapid games, does the rapid format favor the youth? So Jinji Fan, congratulations on winning a chess.com membership. Got any other questions or comments? Hashtag US Chess Champs. So as we get deeper into this game, they're going to have to be really good to get a mention.
And what was the poll? Did the poll come in at 20?
We got a few different answers, and I also think we have Maurice with some thoughts on this opening so far.
Already?
Well, yes. I think that the secret here for Kamsky actually is not to play aggressively, is not to come up with some big problem-solving issues. What does Black have to do in this position to get out of the bind? It's called a bind for a reason, right? Black normally cannot get out of it at will unless White does something to attack. So I'm thinking, what if Kamsky stays put for a very long time? You know the kind of position I'm talking about. He plays his pieces out, and then he puts a rook on d1, a rook on c1, then he puts the rook on d1 back to e1, and then that rook on c1 to e1, he plays h3, he plays king h2, he backs up, he probes a little bit. Pretty soon, because Black doesn't have anything to do, Black's just going to be staring at 5 minutes on the clock. And the person who has no time, would you really want to play Gata Kamsky 30 minutes to 5 minutes, knowing you have to draw in the next 5 minutes? You're going to do something. And the one thing you cannot do is something that opens the position when White's pieces are stopping all the breaks. So I think that it may seem counterintuitive, but it's not really incumbent on White to try to win. It's incumbent on on black to make the draw more so. So white should just, because of the time only because of this big time edge, white should just chill and freeze black for as long as possible. And I think this is the position to do it.
I think you're right, Maurice, and you see a lot of experts in playing in their opponent's time pressure do the same thing.
Right.
If you play a tactical line, hey, that's exactly what your opponent in time pressure is thinking about. If you make a quiet move, suddenly you're like, whoa, I didn't prepare for that, and their time gets eaten up, and then when the game really intensifies, they could be in horrible time pressure.
True. But again, what Maurice is trying to say is let's keep a lot of the pieces on the board. Let's defer the critical moments, the battle, to later when Black's time has been ticking down. And it's just not so easy to do that. In my view, Black has a very clear idea, He wants to trade the pieces with knight c6, knight takes d4. So if Gata takes Maurice's advice and wants to keep the pieces, maybe he should just go over here immediately with knight d4 to b5, attacking the queen, forcing the queen either to back up to d8, and then later in life bring the knight back to a3 when chased. Because otherwise, this plan of Ramirez that we saw in game one was very effective. a6, knight c6, trade a lot of pieces. He made a draw not so completely comfortably, but it was easy for him to play.
And yes, that is the kind of move I'm talking about. A move we may not play normally, but you know what you're trying to do. Keep the pieces on the board. So suddenly you have a different mindset, a different plan. If somebody says to Gata Kamsky, can you keep the pieces on the board and not let the guy break the position open? That's an easier job for him than can you force a win right now or give him like big time problems? And look at him. He's starting to think, how much time does he have left? The clock times would be curious to know how much he's investing in this moment. Maybe you make this huge investment and come up with nothing. Then you've just blown 10 minutes on the clock for what?
Right.
You know, so I think this is a very important moment for him. And maybe he is not playing, well, clearly he's not playing with my strategy at all. He's looking for a way to push this position home. And I think it's a mistake.
Not necessarily. He could be trying to plan in advance so that he can make his next few moves quickly and keep the pressure on Alejandro and try to induce mistakes. That might be his strategy because I think in general he does share your philosophy. And we saw some of that in his Armageddon match against Schulman, where he was actually playing with the black side. But I think that he's got still a comfortable time edge, 34 minutes at this point. So we hope that he'll think up of something interesting to keep this battle going at the U.S. Chess Championship here, where if Gata Kamsky wins, he takes the title. If Alejandro draws or wins, he takes the title.
Exactly. Well, let's just see a potential variation. Knight d5. Let's say queen d7. Okay. Let's imagine bishop e3, as in give me the pawn. Knight c6. Now let's stop this and BKG, keep all the pieces on the board with a move like h3. Now we understand why the move queen d7 was played, to keep the knight protected. And after b6, the idea from Black's point of view is he wants to play bishop b7 and maybe knight a5 or maybe knight e5 in order to trade pieces. Gata has got to figure out how he can stop those trades and increase the pressure. It's tough with this knight sitting out here on the a3 square where it's really not doing that much. He could drop back with the knight to c3, bishop to b7, king h2. I'm just putting some moves on the board to try to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. Something like this, where Gata's superior positional judgment might come into the fore.
Maybe stick a queen on a4 at some point in that variation. It's strange, Gata Kamsky already covering his face with his hands. This is very strange. Is he signifying that he regrets either his bid or his opening choice? We'll find out soon. And he played your move, Yasser. He played knight on d to b5.
Right. And I mean, again, this was what Maurice applauded this move. I understand it very well.
Quick queen d8 by Ramirez.
A quick queen d8 by Ramirez. Well, Gata may have had some regrets that he thought so long on that particular move when his opponent instantly responded with queen d8. I'm sure Gata was more in the, I'm expecting you to play the move
Bishop
queen,
g5
queen
occurred.
d7.
So then bishop g5 got his response. And as you point out, a lot of times we're going to relocate a knight to d5. That bishop on g5 will then be helping to, and yes, in the earlier game we saw bishop f6, knight d5, giving white that slight edge with the better pawn structure.
Exactly. And the play has begun, the tempo of play, pardon me, has begun to get a little bit quicker. White does have the freer development, and maybe Gata is angling for bishop h6, or as Maurice has suggested, just keep as many pieces on the board as possible, which Gata has done successfully at this moment.
a6 and knight c3 played.
All right. Well, finally, there's a little something to work with. Now that a6 has been induced, there comes ideas in the near future of maybe trying to plant a knight on b6. That's the first, let's say, targeted area that Gata can look at in Black's camp. If you look at Black's position, Black doesn't have any real weakness on the board that you can say, oh, this is a terrible thing, I got to jump all over that. And only now has the first slight weakness in what looks like a pretty fortified position appeared. Do we have any moves after knight c3?
No, it looks like yeah.
He played bishop to f5.
Bishop f5 played, and now Gata unmove again.
Okay, well, we talk about the Maroczy bind, made famous by a Hungarian player in the 20th century, Geza Maroczy. He liked his pawns on e4 and c4, trying to clamp down on the d5 square. With this move, bishop f5, Alejandro is saying, I'm going to give you the Maroczy bind with a gain of a tempo in order to cut that bishop on g2. Right now it's an open diagonal. Obviously, once the pawn appears on e4, that diagonal is closed. But again, Gata might say, well, give me whatever it is you want to give me, and if you drop back with your bishop, for example, to e6, I want to jump to the d5 square and put pressure on this knight on f6. If you do capture, I'll capture with the e-pawn, and at least white has some respectable advantage of the two bishops.
That's right, and some pressure along the e-file, and not too many trades, allowing for a rich struggle as he tries to make use of his time advantage here. I think that so provoked, Gata Kamsky will indeed play e4.
Okay, any other suggestion beyond e4? I mean, would you go for this bishop h6, trying to eliminate this bishop on g7 and maybe say to Black, well, your king is more vulnerable once I've traded bishops?
I don't think I would do that because we just recently put our bishop on g5, kind of trying to eye f6 and e7. So I think he's going to stay with that theme. And we do have e4 played,
Okay.
e4 on the board, and it looks like Ramirez has backtracked to e6. Another pretty useful square for the bishop. The natural knight d5 is what we're expecting now from Gata Kamsky. Again, threatening to fracture Ramirez's pawns, which we saw in the first game of this match. Gata Kamsky got an advantage, and Ramirez defended, very solidly in order to score the draw in that game.
These doubled f-pawns is what happened. Black's structure got broken up a bit there.
Knight d5 does look like it was played, but of course in this game, not as easy for Ramirez, because if he gets such a significant disadvantage, then even with enough defensive resources, he's got the time issue.
Right, and that is the number one ally in the position for Gata Kamsky is the clock. We don't want to harp on that too much, but okay, Gata has something that is very tangible. We notice once again why this square b6 is weak. If Black were to make a horrible fault with a move like queen d7, bang, that's a very nice fork, and that would win an exchange. So Ramirez has probably got to eliminate that knight on d5. He doesn't want his pawns to get doubled on the f line. Maurice,
He
your
played knight
thoughts?
back to d7, did Ramirez, knight f to d7, which according to the computer gives white a slight edge. And I think it's even bigger than that psychologically, because right now Kamsky can just make a couple of rook moves. Actually, Kamsky has a bunch of free moves, it looks like, to make. How does black get out of this bind? And he's going to have to figure something out. And the more the moves play now, with Kamsky with all the pieces on the board, the more he's going to have a chance to force Ramirez, who, by the way, is just still moving at an amazing pace. But sooner or later, he's going to run out of moves in some critical moment, and he's going to have to make a decision. And the moment you make a decision against the bind, sometimes is the moment you lose the game. So Kamsky with a very simple rook move over to c1, followed by rook c8, and now b3, playing total power control chess. I know, Yaz, you're used to this kind of chess.
Oh, yeah, I like this for white. I'm a big fan. I've always been a very big believer in space, and I love occupying the center, unlike Nimzovich. That didn't get a rise out of you yet.
Yeah, I'm just checking on these clock times. As I understand, we've got about 23 minutes for Gata Kamsky, and Ramirez haven't not used that much of his initial investment.
Initial time, yeah. And
Still
this
at about
move,
12 or 13.
This move b3 does prepare this knight on a3 is the only hiccup, I would say, in the position for white. White has to determine whether his knight is best placed on c3, or maybe he wants to go knight c2 to b4. I rather like the second idea of knight c2 to b4 a little bit more. But we do have a move.
Rook f e8.
Rook
to e8 was played.
f8, e8, refortifying the pawn on e7. Now, I'm not sure if Gata would like to play rook f e1, which I'm sure he would like to play, but maybe he thinks bringing the knight into play first, deferring the rook move is best. Knight c2 looks right to me, but there's also this knight b1 move, equally attractive, sticking the knight on c3. One thing in black's favor, by the way, that I should point out is black does have pretty good control over this d4 square, and Gata has to keep in mind that at some moment black may return the favor. Nice outpost for white's knight, potentially nice outpost for black's knight on the d4 square.
By the way, Yaz, if I may, I think
please.
that Ramirez is clearly showing his hand. Play fast, play solid, right? Play fast, play solid. And I think Kamsky should be doing the exact same thing. I loved your move, knight to c2. But then again, that b5 break, we see that happen often as well, as something that he's trying to control. So he's in this control mode while playing good moves. But his last move, I think, looks like h3 was played. And so there we go again. Pure control chess. He has to make sure no funny hiccups happen along the way, but I think he's on the right track now. And if Ramirez is actually down to 12 minutes, though it doesn't seem like that much of an investment, it's 12 minutes. I mean, that's not a lot of time. Think for 2 minutes, you're at 10. Think for 2 more, you're at 8, and nothing's happening, and you need a draw. So this is exactly where Kamsky wants to be. Ramirez, any 30-second think is a big percentage of his time. So he's got to watch himself right now. And I don't know that he can come up with anything in this position to even suggest how to draw the game. So he's going to be in heavy time pressure. If this stays like this, 10 minutes equal for each, Ramirez is going to lose.
Okay, well, that's bold. Again, I don't see any anything specific that's wrong with the black position.
I agree, by the way. I don't think anything's wrong with black, really. It's just the time situation again.
It's the
We've
time
got
situation.
about 15 for Ramirez and 27 for Gata now.
Okay.
So some incremental build-up by both players, and
It's the slow build that Maurice wanted to see. The KG veteran, Gata Kamsky, been here, done that. He knows what's at stake, and he's just postponing the battle. This last move, h2, h3, needs a little comment. After h2, h3, one of the things that this move does, it takes away the g4 square, but more importantly, it just prepares king h2, where when white decides it's time to open things up with the move f4, he wants his king nice and safe. So this is a fine preparatory move for a move like king h2 to preface the advance f4. We've seen a move by
a knight d to e5 with the transparent threat of bishop takes on h3, and then the fork on f3 with check. So little threat there to Kamsky. I'm sure he notices it, yes.
Well, he wants to play king h2 anyway, right?
Exactly.
So that even if he didn't notice it, there's a good chance he'd play king h2. So let's see what Ramirez's idea is after that. So of course the point now is that if bishop takes h3, we can just take with the king on h3.
And it looks a little scary to have our king up on h3, but it's only temporary, and that is a piece. So that would be terrible. One idea with this move, knight d7 to e5, he's really provoking f4. Maybe Ramirez is thinking that, I mentioned it before, that he could bring his knight to d4 so that after a move like f4, he could secure the knight on c6. But this is really getting dicey now, because f4, f5 type of attacks really start to become attractive for the first player.
That's right, with the f7 square possibly a target, and a potential f6 move even coming into play. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let's see what Ramirez is going to do after what we think the natural response here is, just king to h2. Well, what could his plan be here? Besides your knight to d4 idea, how is provoking f4 a good thing?
Well, exactly. So indeed, Gata may say, hey, listen, I don't want this knight on recycling itself back.
Oh, and he played king to h1, so none of the above. Not putting the king on h2, where I guess he just felt that on h1 it was even slightly safer. The weird thing about putting it on h1 is that there could be a potential tempo gainer later with something like queen d7. Now, of course, queen d7 fails to knight to b6.
That's right. King h1, interesting.
But that's why they usually play h2, just because it fortifies that pawn. Even if it's not possible now, later in the game, it might be nice to have that pawn strengthened, whereas having the king on h2 doesn't seem to have a lot of drawbacks except in your line. Now knight d4 is prevented because we can simply snatch the knight, and there's no checks.
No wonderful discovered check on the f3 square.
Oh, even here you have, you don't have anything. Yeah, nothing good. Nothing, not good enough for a piece, it appears.
King h1 sidestepped any possibilities of knight d4. Again, saying to his young opponent, okay, you're doing fine, young man, but what are you going to do now? Show me your counterplay. And for Ramirez, it gets a little bit harder. As we know, he wants to draw the game, so he starts looking for forcing lines. But this is not a position where tactics or combinations are in ascendancy, quite the reverse. It's a deep, deep strategic fight, trench warfare, as we might say, and there are no forcing lines, and Gata postponing the critical moments of the battle. We do have a move. Maurice, what do we have?
He played rook c to b8, setting up a potential b5, which actually doesn't work right here because I have the capture and then f4, and the rook is really placed well for that knight. So in fact, not really doing anything with that last move, and that was the danger. I agree with everything you just said, Yaz. Kamsky with king h1 is saying, I'm not going to do too much. You're never going to do anything. And if I just keep playing a pace, then you're going to be looking for moves that don't even exist. What does rook b8 do if b5 is not playable? So I would expect something like a bishop to e3 right now, and f4 is always in the cards. And Kamsky, in fact, has played another move, knight to c2. Quite interesting that he chose that move. Knight back to c2 instead. I wonder what the possibilities of b5 now entail.
Well, one possible move that Rook B8 does set up, in addition to B5, is a possible Queen D7 idea, because now Knight B6 no longer wins in exchange, and H3 is now in take, and then we have to analyze the ramifications of King H2, Bishop takes H3, Bishop takes H3, and Knight F3 check.
Right.
So, of course, there are other ways to defend the H pawn, but King H2 would be the most harmonious.
Well,
so that could be an interesting point that Ramirez was trying to make with Rook B8, that maybe in the future he can now try to tickle that pawn on H3.
True, but keep in mind that knight on E5 does not have a secure square, so that the move F2, F4, black knight on E5 is going to need that retreating square to D7, so it's not that easy for black to set up the threat that you want to set up of bishop takes H3.
We could do Queen C8, but then after F4, it's our bishop on E6 that might end up being bereft of squares.
Correct. And I don't like that for the second player. But Maurice made a very good point here. I mean, the move Rook B8 was really, had the straightforward intention of B5.
He did play Queen to
move,
D7.
certainly not-
Queen to D7 was played.
Queen to D7 was played? Oh my goodness.
Well,
okay.
if Queen B7, F4, what's on tap now? Bishop, there's F6 with the knight F7, or Bishop H3 immediately just takes on E5. So
Right.
his plan here, playing
That would cost black a piece.
no
That doesn't-
real compensation there.
So
And it's
F6 would probably be forced, but doesn't that cost black a pawn? Captures simply the very simple capture here.
Well, H3 isn't take at the end.
Oh, you mean after this? I see what you're saying. That is correct. Jen, I stand corrected there. So
Well,
let's
there's
go
a lot of
back.
tactics there. I mean, as we see before, when we look at these like capture lines, you always got to look for the nagging in between moves. So
Well, I'll tell you what, I still like this very much for white. Maybe we just step back with the bishop. If you're forced to retreat the knight, I'm not saying you
we
are.
could maybe take on H3 because we might have a G5 trapping move of our own.
That's right.
Something to think about. A
I
lot of
was
candidate
thinking
moves.
about G4, and this bishop settles nicely, I might add, on this G3 square, reinforcing our king.
Very pleasant position for white.
Absolutely. Big attacking chances, therefore. I'm not sure
So
this
after
move...
F4, F6, Bishop H4, though, what about Bishop takes H3? Well, no, after F6, insert your F6 first.
Right.
And then after Bishop H4, maybe capture on H3 here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
then
so
I was,
you wanted to play something with a G6, G5, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see you're going to get a lot of pawns for it. It's going to be a bit of a mess, huh?
Well, I would be frightened to death to
Yeah.
allow something of this nature.
And not only that,
where
we're
we've
down
got
we're down a pawn here also. Yeah.
Guys, if I may, the move of the tournament was position. With the idea of eventually over was the choice. He's keeping the position under control. E3, and then Ramirez played his knight back to D7 to challenge that knight, and Kamsky, playing the right ideas, dropped his knight back to D5. No trades except the ones I like.
That's right. Definitely considering the situation here. And now if Ramirez tries to backtrack and play knight F6, situation has changed a bit. Bishop B6 is now on the menu.
As mentioned, the one small target in black's position, potentially weak square B6. Obviously, in this case, Gata is eyeballing that B6 square, but I love that suggestion of the computer, and a very difficult one for the human being to lead with the G pawn. It's so common for white to lead with the F pawn, but that move G4, just expanding on the king side, stopping any bishop takes H3 ideas, and as a preparatory blow for F4, that looks like that would have given Alejandro serious problems to consider.
Not to mention F4 itself also looked very threatening as well.
Also,
So quiet,
Right.
but still very relentless pressure here.
For sure.
And we do have the clock times now displayed by popular demand at U.S. chess champs. I think we got about 50 questions for Glad Times. It just goes to show that the viewership for this exciting playoff
Yes.
is definitely increasing. We love to see these rapid playoffs for all the marbles. It's a lot of fun, though of course it's extremely nerve-wracking for the players and their fans.
Absolutely. And we have a different approach, finally, a different approach by Ramirez. He has played the move knight d7 to c5, blocking the view of the bishop to that b6 square. In some ways, earlier the knight was on e5. We thought it was provoking the move f4. Now that the knight is on c5, it's provoking, a potential b4. Gata has played cagey. He's kept all the pieces on the board. Maurice is a big fan of this strategy by white. Now it's time to play something concrete, and it's either going to be f4 and f5, or maybe something like b4, a4, b5. Consequences for both actions, of course.
But definitely a well-played game so far by both sides in that, both are sticking to the strategy. Ramirez really evening the clock disadvantage by quite a bit, right? He started off the game with
Clear.
19 to 45. Now it's 20 to about 12.
Right.
So if this gets even and he's got the draw odds, obviously it's a clear advantage for Ramirez, even if he has a slight disadvantage on the board.
Right. And finally, and dare I say it last, Gata is
Charge
the
ahead.
first one to make a commitment. This isn't a bridge burning or anything like that, but he has made the determination that the key battle area is going to be on the king side and in the center. This move f4 is a clear setup for the advance f4, f5. Black very often in these positions plays f5 himself in order to prevent the advance, and then after a capture, either a capture with the pawn or with the bishop, at least in this case, the knight on c5 could swing to e4. Still, I do like white's advantage in space, and I just absolutely love this knight on
And
d5.
we do have a move from Ramirez. He has played b5, and Maurice has some thoughts on that.
Now, that is the kind of move of a desperate man. He needs to do something because he's getting stepped on slowly, and I think that this move will probably cost him the championship. You've got to handle this right. That move f4, Yaz, is the kind of move that says, I'm maybe threatening f5. You think I'm threatening f5, but I'm also squeezing you to make sure you don't have any moves whatsoever. And Ramirez decided, I can't just sit here anymore. I need to make a move. And the computer says b5 is bad. It makes the disadvantage even worse for him. And it likes now charging ahead with white. It felt that the opening of the game is going to favor the side with space and the better developed pieces. You can see that white has the chances here because of his great pieces. It wants to take on b5 and charge ahead with f5 to prove a real advantage.
Wow, I just noticing that this rook is nicely placed on the c file, hoping to take advantage of something with those two knights. The rook on b8 is a little bit passive here. Of course, black got in his. What he wants, hopes, is a freeing advance. But this f5 move, you certainly don't want to capture that pawn, which really does open up that Catalan fianchetto bishop. But stepping back, this really has, this is very, very passive. Now ideas of bishop h6 and a potential for bishop takes g7, f6 type of attacks. White hasn't made any investment. He hasn't sacrificed anything.
That's right, and white did capture on b5.
Gata captured on b5, quickly a takes b5, and now this moment, but hey, f4, f5, what else to do? You don't want black to just simply maintain his knights on these squares. You want to try to exploit them, and f4, f5 looks like the way to do it.
Now, Ramirez has been in the defensive this entire match, even with the white pieces. Gata outplayed him in the opening, and Ramirez scored a draw. So it's more of that same pattern.
Right.
Gata attacking, Ramirez defending. Is he going to be successful in this game?
Well, Gata attacking, Ramirez defending successfully has been the story of this playoff. And Maurice, more thoughts from you?
Oh, I was just sitting here looking at this move F5 that just got played. Gata is now decided it's time to charge down the board. He's playing precise chess, power chess, and Ramirez needed to think about this situation. His clock's going to start ticking now, yes, because there are not really many good choices. If he trades off the bishop for the knight and pawn takes, his knight will find this great square on E5, but white will play knight B4, even knight D4 is not a bad place, but B4 is great too. And now you've got to start thinking, man, what am I going to do? White has all the space in the world, the two bishops. He's flattening him like a pancake in this position. So black has to be very careful because his position looks like it's getting significantly worse, and the computer has him now at a half a pawn disadvantage, which any more mistakes, that could go bigger, plus he's down on time. So Ramirez fans right now
On edge.
clutching their fists quite tightly because this is not really looking good for him.
No, that's right. I mean, white better on both sides of the board.
Right.
Got weaknesses to play on the queen side, and as you pointed out, very few defenders left on the king side. Now that the knights have departed, the queen's not in the game. Just that bishop on G7 defending the king and not a lot of counterplay. A more complicated defense, it would appear, than his other defenses in this tournament.
And we have seen this exchange of bishop for knight,
Knight
knight e5.
And your move, knight b4, it looks was played attacking the c6 square and defending the d3 square. An outpost knight, not normally where you see an outpost knight right on b4.
Right.
But it can't be attacked by a pawn, and knight to c6 would also unleash the extra powers of that bishop on g2.
Exactly.
Which might find
Guys,
itself on d5 one day.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. The computer is going gaga now. It says white is up to 0.71, and black's best line, queen a5, and give away the pawn on c5. It doesn't like black's position at all.
And who would blame him? Trying to get a little bit of counterplay, making white give up one of the best pieces on the board in order to diffuse some of it. And it doesn't look, did he play queen a5?
He did.
He did play queen a5.
Wow.
So continuing his sharp defensive alert, right? I mean, he just didn't want to get smashed.
Right. The
And so
alertness
here-
factor from Ramirez continues to impress. It's not everybody who would be flippantly giving Gata Kamsky a pawn in an Armageddon game for the U.S. Championship title, but recognizing that there was like a boa constrictor python effect that Gata was pressing in the position, this was the right move to try to get counterplay. I do agree.
What about knight?
Capturing the pawn on c5, your opponent offers you a pawn, you take it.
And
But
this
you
all
had to-
happened. I was going to ask about knight to c6, just because it's a forcing variation here that we've been looking at.
Okay, so we would get this trade, and I'm not 100% sure I need to take the knight on c6. That's the problem.
Yeah, rook
Jen.
a8, and then we
Rook
got to...
a8, and then we got an issue on b2. So we go back. Gata had said, okay, I'm going to take what my opponent's offering me, and he's taken twice on c5. And there is a move that I personally would find very disturbing if I were white, and that move would be knight d3, so that trading, I think, is in black's best interest, and what's really in black's best interest is, quite frankly, getting a bishops of opposite color. Then white's advantage over the pawn gets reduced. I'm not saying knight...
Instead, he did capture on c5, and it looks like Ramirez has also made a response, and I think Maurice had something to add about all this.
Well, the computer loves your move, Yaz. You were right on point. Knight d3 was the way to go to minimize the advantage, get the opposite colored bishop. So the correct way to play. It didn't like knight b4 because of this queen a5 idea, transferring into the possibility of the opposite colored bishop ending. It preferred knight d4 with all the same pluses and stopping that move queen to a5. So a little inaccuracy by Kamsky, but a missed shot by Ramirez. Knight d3 probably would have shocked Kamsky if that had landed on the board. So we see again that he's missing moves. That move there would have really been a surprising one going into an ending that really wasn't that much better for white. Clearly better, but that opposite colored bishop position we know could have led to very defensive possibilities, great defensive possibilities for black. But that's all history now, and we have this position on the board.
And instead he played rook to c8, rook on b to c8.
Rook b8 to c8. Well, trading pieces isn't isn't the worst thing that can befall black in this position. Now, how on earth can Kamsky make hay? How about this for an idea? Rook takes d6. Throw that pawn up the board, and in case of a capture, let's try to entomb that bishop, which I don't like. That bishop on g7 is a nasty, nasty piece. And if we can get the bishop to go defensive, then something perhaps like queen d4. It's a positional pawn sacrifice with the idea of one day, maybe not in the immediacy, but one day just occupying the d5 square. The material's even, but I like the activity of white's pieces.
Yes, and Gata Kamsky now on thought still has almost twice as much time as his opponent, but the situation's evening a bit. He's getting close to 14 minutes. Alejandro is still at 9 minutes. So the time situation equalizing, but white keeping the advantage on the board.
Right. Well, for the moment, this queen is so darn annoying, pinning that knight. That was why I lashed out with that rook c8, d6, f6 idea. I'm just thinking of ways of trying to break the pin. Another possibility is that we could take, and break the pin in another way, going this direction, queen f4. I'm still protecting the knight. I'm opening up the possibility of knight c6, eyeballing this pawn on f7.
Rook takes c8 and rook takes c8, pawn takes g6 all occurred.
That has occurred.
And also Ramirez has recaptured with the h-pawn. Queen f4 on the board, tying down that knight to defensive f7, as you anticipated.
Whoops, my arrows, I got to get a bad arrow in every single time. But the knight on e5 does indeed defend f7, and that's why the move knight c6 has got to concern Ramirez. Again, the times, 14 minutes for Gata. Looks like Mother Nature's giving him a call.
He's just
9
getting
minutes,
up and pacing.
or pacing. And things are really heating up as it all comes down to what's going to happen over the next 20 minutes. U.S. champion about to be born.
That's right.
That's pretty amazing to me that he got up in this critical situation. Mother Nature should have called like before the game. Now just several minutes could pass, or at least a minute could pass if he did walk out the room. We're not getting any camera angles showing that, but he certainly is doing really well right here. He's up a pawn clear, and that knight about to go to c6. That's going to be a huge problem for Ramirez right now. And the computer says 0.89 for white. 0.89, almost a full pawn, giving some nod to the bishop of opposite color position, but certainly you don't want to be black in this position here. And I actually think getting up might even be another bit of a tactic. This point, sometimes when you're sitting there, your opponent feels your presence, and so you move. But if you leave and just let them stew for a second, they could spend a lot of time because they're stuck in their own thoughts. And this might be the tactic that Kamsky is playing right now, just going away from the board and letting his opponent stop and think for himself as though he was sitting in his living room looking at this position, but he ain't in his living room. He's on the stage at the U.S. Championship, and you can't think for too long. You're going to have to make a move.
Indeed, and somebody asked on Twitter what would have happened if both players would have made the same exact bid in the final game. The answer is that the arbiter would flip a coin to see which side got black and draw odds. Of course, it's very rare for that to happen because they do have the option to bid minutes and seconds, which turned out to be quite important in this bidding process since it was within just 15 seconds of each other, right? 1945 for Ramirez and 20 minutes for Gata Kamsky. That's why Ramirez is playing black and has draw odds in this Armageddon game, the last game of the U.S. Chess Championship. We can finally say it.
Right, the final game of the U.S. Sudden death. And here, the more I'm looking at this position, actually, the more I appreciate the pawn. I always do appreciate having the extra pawn. But in this particular case, it's this knight on c6 that's hanging like the sword of Damocles over black's position, because if white is able to eliminate that knight on e5, in combination, this battery on the f-file is simply huge, and there is no chance that knight takes c6 d takes c6 could be allowed. That passer would decide the game definitely in Gata's favor. The problem
Now
for
what- bishop
Ramirez,
f6, yeah.
this is the natural human move to put the bishop on f6, nicely blocking the f file, saying, ha, 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 but guess what? Bang! d5, d6 not only opens up this bishop, but opens up a path to the d5 square for white's knight, and suddenly every single piece of white's is coordinating against black's king. A wonderful attacking position for white, and he has a pawn in hand. That would be killer, frankly.
Oh, yeah, that looks fantastic. Although the pawn on d5 also does so much, supporting the knight to c6 move.
And just to show a potential checkmate,
Ramirez shaking his head.
he
Uh-oh, he
doesn't
can't find.
like this. Just a potential checkmate idea in the position for Kamsky. I spoke about it just a brief moment ago. I wouldn't want this criminal on c6 to get there. And if Ramirez did something like queen c7, here is a familiar mating pattern that we've seen plenty of times in chess. Move like queen h4, knight takes e7. Thanks to the fact that there's no h-pawn in the position, black's king is in trouble. So Ramirez facing a very difficult task at this moment, and check out his time, but a move has...
He played queen to c7, but only
Queen to
4
c7.
minutes and 34 seconds on the clock. Kamsky with a pregnant 10-minute advantage almost, and up a pawn as well. This is like a nightmare for Ramirez right now.
Right. And knight c6 looks like the most natural move on the board. I can't... Well, is there other ideas? Ideas of h4, h5, just to try to bust open the fortress on black's king side. That's a thought. Takes some time. If I were playing a blitz game, it would be very, very hard to prevent my hand from playing knight c6 in this position. Maybe Gata is just concerned, I don't know if he should be or not, that in this opposite color bishop position, a blockade.
We do have a move. It looks like a4 was played and captures. So after
Queen c7.
after queen c7, instead a4, trying to make use of that extra pawn on the queen side.
Makes some sense. It wasn't the first move that occurred to me, but it does say, okay, you're the one who gave me the pawn, the extra pawn. I'm going to use it.
And now the idea could be a5 followed by knight to c6.
Right, a5, you don't want this pawn running down the board. And a moment ago, remember the queen was on a5, pinning the knight to the queen on d2. Rook a8 would be terrible, of course, because of d6 with the discovered attack. But I'm saying if this rook were to leave the protection of its queen, then this is a very unpleasant pin for black as well, with knight c6. So Ramirez facing all kinds of issues at the moment, and that move a4, very cagey, and he's got something to play with now as Ramirez opening up his king with the move f7, f5.
A surprising move, trying to protect his f-pawn permanently, but creating a whole host of other weaknesses, including the g6 pawn, the e6 square, possible tactics with d6 in the position, in certain positions. This looks very dangerous for Ramirez with very little time on his clock. We did get a comment from the Natalia Poganina.
Yes.
Yes, international master, women's grandmaster, and
Right.
she says classical Soviet, leave the board and allow the opponent to take his time tactics from Gata Kamsky.
Is that on how to think like a grandmaster? Sometimes it's good to get up from the board and let your opponent find all the ghosts that exist in the position.
By the way, guys, we
Maurice.
talk about the children of the computer generation, and Ramirez just played a move that the computer did recommend. It thought f7 to f5 was absolutely the best move to play right now to have any chance of holding this game. To our human eyes, though, I mean, that looks like you're opening up your king, you're exposing weaknesses everywhere. but it thought that f7, f5 was the right way to go. Shows that guys like me and you, Yaz, they're trying to put us out to pasture with these kind of funky moves.
We're dinosaurs, Maurice. I know it, don't I know it? But I mean, I also know that I like being pawns up, and I'm willing to enter this ending now that I've seen this move f5 by knight c6. I'm just trying to analyze the consequences of a trade on c6, and Gata has played something.
He did play knight to c6.
Right, okay, so that was well timed, I believe. Now after f takes,
Captures.
d takes c6, a capture has, and Gata, why are you thinking Gata? Oh, because he's thinking, pardon me, he is thinking whether or not the rook is worse on c7. Maybe he's considering that he doesn't want the bishop to blockade, so he could be considering the consequences of trading queens at once, followed by recapturing on c6. That pawn is just huge, and if he, Gata, could play a move like bishop d5 check, and maybe swing this rook, swing this rook over.
Start pushing the a pawn. It looks
it's beginning to look really, really pleasant. So Gata, a big choice. I don't think he has to do that, however. I do prefer, frankly, capturing immediately, because if black captures on e5, maybe just simply take with the pawn so that the bishop isn't allowed this opportunity to fall back on this key diagonal, stopping the path of the c-pawn. But this looks very pleasant for white. a5, a6, bishop d5 check, a7 or c7. It's all coming nicely together, and again, the times, 10 minutes for Gata, 3.5, let's call it, for Alejandro.
Yes, and Gata Kamsky just looking to be with a really pleasant choice in this position and all the trumps in the game.
Absolutely. You mentioned, Jen, that the pawn on g6 is weak after the move f5. I think Ramirez is going to be forced to trade queens, because I don't think he's going to want to allow anything like queen to c4 check, followed by queen to e6, nibbling on this pawn on g6.
Yeah, in that position, though, bishop to e5 looks a little tricky, even with queen c4 check.
Bishop e5.
I mean, I still like white, but after king to g7, maybe, the pawn probably should do that. And maybe Kamsky didn't think he needed to open up his king in any way or open up the position. Because he did trade, by the way. He did trade on c7.
Trade. Okay.
He traded on c7.
And they're going quickly
now. Played bishop to d5 check, king f8.
He traded on c. He traded and then he
traded. Then he took on c6.
And now we have this position on the board, and what was played by black after
e5, I think.
e5.
Pawn to e5.
Ooh, I don't think I like that move, because these pawns might be blockaded. How about bishop d5 check?
That did happen. Bishop d5, king f8. And now the move of the tournament, once again. G4.
And I really, really like it. I think that this is simply huge.
The computer is going gaga, by the way.
Oh,
guys.
yeah, I mean, g4 now forcing f4 to hold on to the pawn.
Now the problem from black's point of view is these pawns on e5 and f4 are very easily blockaded thanks to the light square bishop. He has a passer on a4 and c6, and get this, a potential passer over here as well. So 3 potential passers in the position. The players are moving quickly.
G4, after G4, he played king E7 and gave up the pawn on F5.
So Gata Kamsky, 2 pawns up in an Armageddon game where he must win, is
king D6
king
played
D6,
and bishop F3.
F3.
Bishop.
And this is our current position. Ramirez with just 2.5 minutes left and 2 less pawns. It's just finally looks like Ramirez is not going to be able to defend one. I mean, he's been defending so well, but I don't think he can get out of this. Rook A7 played.
I'm sure Rook G5 is next, attacking that bishop, preparing both offensive Rook G6 check ideas as well as defensive Rook G4 ideas 2 pawns up. I gotta say Gata's winning. I just gotta say. Gotta say it. Okay, what has happened?
He played rook to g5.
He did play rook to g, and I think I see
And
e5,
E4
on the
again,
board.
a computer move. That was the computer's top choice. Again, a shocker, releasing his bishop along the long diagonal. It's still white for choice. White still winning, but still the best move, Yaz, but a surprising one.
True that, but okay, so Ramirez is hoping that he can get into some kind of a rook ending, 2 pawns down, bishop takes e4, rook takes. I think that this is just simply winning. What say you all? Is this king and pawn endgame winning or no? It's not. So that was at least what Alejandro had calculated. Do we have
Bishop
more
takes
moves?
e4 played.
Bishop takes e4.
He's currently down 3 pawns.
But I'm missing something. After rook to, oh, pardon me, of course, simply rook g6 check first, followed by c7, and then rook takes. So you can't even play rook takes a4 in this position. Black is going to have to play something like bishop e5.
And that happened. He did play bishop to
which
e5.
in fact was played. Wow.
So bishop e5, trying to get the pawn on a4 next move.
3 pawns ahead. Why not just defend one of them? How about bishop c2, defending this pawn and saying, I'll defend this pawn as well with rook c6. Rook g6.
Maybe try to round out the pawn anyway with the rook a6.
True. And I don't want to go into bishops of opposite color. 2 pawns up.
You could play I guess you could play c7 there, but then we could play rook to c6 and hit your bishop at the same time and capture the pawn with that rook.
Right on. Okay, so unfortunately I can't.
Gata Kamsky trying to find the best technical
How
move
about-
in this position.
How about a move like bishop d3? The idea is in case of rook takes a4 to try to throw down c7.
But still rook a1 check followed by rook c1, right?
Right, that's a nice one.
So-
Getting the rook behind the pawn as
So
we...
key in the endgame as we've seen. Instead, something to g6, I believe. It would have been rook g6 by white.
Okay, rook
this
g6.
And king c5. Rook g6, king to c5. The computer is giving black a 2-pawn deficit. It did not like that last move. It felt that king to c7 was best. King to c5, it thinks, is a real mistake. But still no clear line that shows exactly how white should win this position. Though I suspect there is a way to win.
Yeah, Gata on move with a 5-minute advantage here. 7.5 minutes to Ramirez's 2 minutes.
And Gata's got to make a decision. Does he want to defend this pawn on a4 or try to keep it with bishop c2? Or does he want to bring his king in and put all of his eggs on one basket, the h pawn? Not an easy choice by any means here. Very difficult, in fact. But let me just try the move bishop c2. I like my pawns. I like defending pawns. Jen, you mentioned a pretty good idea, I think. I was trying to set you up for a trap like this, but I may end up simply trapping myself. I'm not sure. I play c7, threatening a discovered attack against your rook, as well as making a queen. My trick was that if you drop back with your rook, I had bishop, well, I'm not even sure it's a trick anymore. I thought I had a trick with bishop e4 and rook c6. Oh
It does
dear.
look like we have a move from Gata.
Bishop f3.
Bishop f3 by Gata Kamsky. Now Alejandro under 2 minutes.
Okay.
Gata Kamsky relaxing, taking a sip of water.
Okay,
we can
he's
see from
feeling
our webcam.
confident. I guess his idea is that you can't take the pawn on a4 thanks to c7, and if the bishop takes, then you've got the move rook check, winning the bishop.
Well, good thing we
So-
don't have to see rook and bishop versus rook in an Armageddon game where black has draw odds.
Right.
That would
So-
be pretty intense. But that extra h pawn, of course, will and make it an easy win for Gata.
And on my screen, I can see that the computer approves of this move, bishop f3 by Gata, which by tactical means defends the pawn on a4 and gets out of any captures. After rook takes a4, the bishop on e4 would not be hanging.
It seems like black is under a minute, guys. I mean, the time has been frozen, and now, there we go, refreshing. He's at 55 seconds, down 3 pawns. This cannot be good at all. He must lose this position.
He must find a miracle way to trade off everything but the bishop on f3 and the pawn on h3.
Right.
That's the miracle endgame he'd be looking
Right.
to transpose into here.
Just
But
to
I
be
think Kamsky studied that one when he was about 8 years old.
Exactly. Just to be clear, what Jen is mentioning is the classic wrong bishop and rook pawn ending. If black could give up his rook bishop for white's rook and pawns a4 and c6, he would be drawing. I don't think he's going to get that.
King b6 played.
King
Now to
b6.
19 seconds, by the way. 19 seconds.
19
19.
seconds.
It looks like on the board. No, actually, he's just gotten 5 seconds back, so he's at
G5, attacking the bishop and preparing to swing across to the b5 square with a check. I think that's going to secure the U.S. Championship title for Gata. Nice move, very nice move.
Rook g5, and he's getting down to his final seconds. Rook a5 played. Again, basically playing on the increment. The only reason Ramirez is playing on the increment is because he knows that he's busted.
Exactly. Now Gata, I think, feels that enough. White's going to play king f2.
King c7's been played.
King c7, so that rook is still in it. Well, maybe just keep going.
Just keep
H5.
going and then take on e5 at the end of the variation.
Exactly. At the end of the variation, though, what Jen is mentioning is that you could take, and now after h6, the bishop has to come back, and after h7, the king, bishop are glued to their squares, and white's king will just dance.
And we do have h5, king d6 on the board.
The computer's up to 4.13 evaluation for white. The gigantic edge with the clock times being ridiculous.
h5, king d6 played.
Okay, so now finally, rook takes a4, breaking this pin, and Gata just loving this moment. He's played really, really a great game, and he should be able to reel in the whole point.
Guys, here's a line for you. h6, rook takes a4, rook takes e5.
Wow.
Nasty
takes,
tactic. And after king takes, then
C7,
c7 and
Pawns are too much to
H7
handle.
and
You can play rook
everybody.
h4 and win that h pawn, but guess what? I'm going to queen the other pawn.
That's right. We've got
And
two
h6
brides.
was played, finishing in style, seeing that variation that the pawn on a4 is just taboo, but Ramirez took it.
And now we're waiting for the move.
Are we
Rook
going to see
e5.
rook takes
is a
e5
killer.
to secure this 4th championship title?
I'm sure he is. I'm sure because Gata, before he played the move h6, could have played a simple defensive move like rook g4. But here it is,
There
the
it
U.S.
goes.
Championship. And
And,
Alejandro Ramirez, down to 12 seconds, knows his fate has been sealed.
He's got to take the rook, right? I mean, there can't be
Yes.
any other moves.
Take the rook or resign.
Instead of looking
I
at
think
it, just
those
take
are-
the rook.
He
and
has
he's done
taken the
it.
rook.
And c7. And
C7.
Gata's going to be
C7.
feeling really good right now.
You cannot
Winning
protect
in
both
style.
pawns.
And
it's
there it
over. Gata Kamsky, our new U.S. chess champion, and his 4th title. A fantastic finish to this. I mean, we couldn't have asked for more excitement today at the U.S. Chess Championship. Thank you all for watching, and we're actually going to be getting Grandmaster Gata Kamsky down for an interview here shortly.
Exactly.
I can't wait to see an exhausting day of chess.
Well, I mean, I haven't played in this tournament, but after 9 days of commentary, I know how the players were feeling. I felt really, really low on energy. Watching the playoffs, especially after game 2, I felt great. I suddenly had a burst of energy, adrenaline.
Oh, yeah, me
and
too.
And this Armageddon game really woke me up completely. This was high-level world championship chess, and Alejandro should be proud of himself. I know he's disappointed, but when it really came to it, Gata Kamsky, world-class player that made him the challenger to the World Championship, emerged.
And a great game for a rapid game. I mean, that's amazing to play that kind of high-level game and even finish it in style with rook takes e5 with just a 45-minute game with the stakes being so high.
Yeah.
I mean, that game might have been better than some of his regular time control games.
I'm telling you, he wasn't so convincing. Even when he was going through his winning streak of 4-0, folks seemed to be gifting him points, but today he really, really earned it. A great win by Gata Kamsky, and my congratulations. Welcome to the 4-time U.S. Championship Club.
Yeah, nice, exactly. Yasser Seirawan, also a 4-time U.S. chess champion. And the congratulations are rolling in for Gata Kamsky, Poganina, other top players here are just really excited. The live audience at the St. Louis Chess Club. And he's just getting set up for his interview with Grandmaster Ashley right now. So we're excited to have you guys all here. And with this win, he won also $30,000 first prize.
And the prestige and honor of being U.S. champion, honor he will carry for an entire year.
And Nakamura is smiling.
Exactly.
Right,
Hikaru called it. He said that Gata was going to win and wanted him to win and was rooting for him to win all the way. So, magnificent performance by Gata Kamsky. Maurice.
Yes, I'm here with the 2013 U.S. chess champion, Gata Kamsky, your 4th win. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
How does it feel right now in the aftermath of what was a really titanic struggle against the underdog, Ramirez?
Well, it was almost felt like we were equals. I mean, whatever I did, he always came up with the counter move. And I was starting to get really nervous. And then, of course, I'm sure he missed a lot of opportunities in this final game to almost equalize. But, we played until the last move, and it wasn't clear until the last move what happened.
Now, the first 2 games were cagey. You hadn't won a game, by the way. We had to point this out. You didn't win in like 6 tries. Has that ever happened to you in a U.S. championship? When's the last time that happened to you?
Okay, I don't want to think about that.
So what was your mindset going into this last game? Also, he outbid you. You said 20 minutes. He said 1945. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How did that feel when you found out that you had been outbid?
Well, first we also discussed the increments because there was a possibility that we could play without increments. So I realized once we have increments, the time difference is smaller because, of course, every move he gets 10 or 5 seconds or 15.
5 seconds.
Yeah, 5 seconds. So basically you can plan the increment until the time trouble. But yeah, I remembered my beating protest against the Schulman Yuri a while back. And I thought I've chosen 25 minutes at that time. This time I decided to be more sure and picked 20 minutes, but it was kind of funny when he showed up with 19 and 40.
So you definitely wanted to have black in that situation.
It would be nice to have black, of course, because, I'm very solid and he's also very solid, and we both, the players, whoever tries to get through is really difficult.
By the way, you mentioned that you didn't realize that you were playing for $10,000 difference. You thought the prizes would be split down the middle. How does it feel to know extra $5,000 just jumped in your pocket?
Well, the money is always nice. I mean, but of course, to me, it was more important to finally win a game because right now, before the game, I didn't feel like I deserved to win because the way my games went, and I had 5 draws, in which I missed probably 2 or 3 wins. And the way the rapid goes, and I consider myself to be one of the strongest rapid players in the world, not to be like completely over-optimistic, but still. And 2 draws in the rapids were a bit disappointing, sure. So in this game, I had to go and win, and then I told myself, Gata, you can't make any more draws, you gotta win.
So indeed, you were forced to win in that last game.
Exactly.
We saw a little bit of shock on your face when he played the move Rook G2 to draw the second game. That came as a big surprise to you, an ending that of course, since you were 12 years old, probably.
No, I have seen this move, but I went into this endgame thinking I would be winning. And then, of course, I had a similar endgame against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and he didn't defend correctly. But this guy knew, so, I was like, I can't get this guy. Like, whatever I do, he's always like Houdini,
What do you think of his prospects? Do you think he's just playing well this tournament, or that he's actually risen in strength somehow to another level?
Well, the way he played against me, I could feel that, it's a different Ramirez I played a year ago, definitely. So, in a way, it's good, I'm happy.
Now, you had this comment at the very first round of the tournament. You said that the young players would be slaughtered this tournament. And taking that back, because it looks like they really acquitted themselves well.
No,
Caden Trough got a GM norm.
Right.
Sevian got an IM norm. It looks like the young players played
I never
well.
said they will be slaughtered. I just said they're going to try really hard and push for a win, and that's what I was looking for. And I said that I'll try to give my best back, And I was really happy to see these guys, they kicked our ass,
They are definitely coming back. And now, one final question for you. This is your 4th title. You've entered a very elite group of players, including our very own Yasser Seirawan. What does that mean to you?
Well, to be honest, the title, the first time that I won here, the 2nd title, that was like very special to me. And right now the 3rd and the 4th title, it makes me happy, of course, but it also makes me sad, because, in a way I was hoping, somebody else would become a champion, some of the younger players. But I just wasn't going to, go away without a fight, and hopefully next year there will be a new champion.
Why? Now, tell me why that is. I have to ask.
Because, I have like only a couple of years left in me of playing chess, and I just want to see, while I'm still playing, that there are young and coming grandmasters coming, and they'll be entering elite, just like Hikaru did. Because so far I have seen only Hikaru do it. And I've been playing chess now since my return for 8 years now, and only been Hikaru. And I think it's time for somebody else to come in also.
Very gentlemanly of you, but in the meantime, you are the 2013 U.S. champion, 4-time champion, certainly putting your name in the record books of chess history. Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
The 2013 U.S. chess champion, Gata Kamsky, a fantastic achievement. Back to you, Jen and Yas.
Many congratulations to Gata Kamsky, and so modest and wonderful thinking about the future of U.S. chess here.
Absolutely, and that was the whole point, in fact, of these 2013 U.S. Chess Championships, was here at the St. Louis Chess Club. The entire concept, the whole wild cards, was to give these young chess players, Caden, Sam, Conrad, Sarah, opportunities to face the best in the United States, gain experience, gain confidence, and it worked marvelously well, better than anybody could expect. In the end, our #1 seed did win, but I just am so happy that I was a part of this whole U.S. Championship. I was about to say world U.S. Championships, because it was really a fantastic event. Jen, special thanks to you. You've been terrific hostess. And Maurice, always very special to work with Maurice. I enjoyed it very much. So just a shout out to everybody who made it all possible. Thank you so very much.
Yes, I want to take a special opportunity to thank all of our listeners, including from all over the world, Norway Chess. We even had Grandmaster Nakamura, the 2012 champion, watch this playoff in between beating world champions. That was pretty exciting. And also thank, of course, the people who made this live stream possible. Spectrum Studios, headed up by Randy Sinkfield, Macaulay Peterson, always doing a fantastic job. Yes, we definitely couldn't have done it without him, right?
Right.
Manning all these controls. We've also got the staff at the St. Louis Chess Club, headed by Tony Rich and Joy Bray, not only doing everything for the players to make their tournament better, but also making sure that this ran smoothly. We want to thank all the staff here at the World Chess Hall of Fame as well. And, of course, Fox Sports Midwest, who believed in chess. And I hope that they will continue. In fact, we're going to see the special on May 25th, 6 p.m. Central Time, and it's going to also air in additional time. So be sure to check your local listings and find the recap show, which is going to include a lot of behind-the-scenes highlights and interviews additionally. Of course, the arbiters, Frank Guadalupe and Carol Jarecki, Alex Marler, and Tony Rich again. Finally, we always have to give a shout out to the sponsors and the founders of the Chess Club and the Hall of Fame, Rex Sinkfield and Jeannie Sinkfield. Fantastic things they've done for chess, and the 5th in a row U.S. Chess Championship and U.S. Women's here in St. Louis.
And it's just been getting better and better. And again, thank you to everybody. And again, Maurice, you're the man.
That's right. Thank you to Maurice Ashley and all of his great commentary and interviews throughout these 2 weeks here in St. Louis.
Guys, it was my pleasure to work with you. This was a fantastic team. It was so much fun, amazing. We had to work an extra day, and it was more fun than the first 9 days. So really a pleasure for me to be with this commentary team.
Indeed. You know, it's a good gig when you're excited to work an extra day. That's right. And, of course, for that, we've got to thank our players for all of their exciting games. Even when they weren't playing for the championship, we got thrills and chills in this championship. Special shout-out to Shabalov and Christensen for their
Remarkable
absolute
achievement.
Decisive games, of 18 decisive games between the two of them. That's fantastic. You kept everyone guessing. And congratulations to Irina Krush, our U.S. women's champion, and Gata Kamsky, our U.S. chess champion. 9 titles now between the two of them. Absolutely thrilling.
Yes.
And
Also,
we wish we could. We wish we had more games to analyze. But finally, I think it's about time for us to sign off. And once again, this is Jennifer Shahade, and I'm signing off with Grandmasters Yasser Seirawan and Maurice Ashley after 2 amazing weeks of chess.